Hi, I'm Hannah. This is Katja. We work at Immediate, which, if anyone who doesn't know, is home to all of those much loved passion brands. And we're going to talk to you about our approach to generative AI. And we're going to start with the context behind how we've gone about it and why we've framed our approach like that, how we've gone about it, what we've done, and then the questions that we are kind of posing and digesting right at the minute as we look to the future. I hope, Olivia and Angie, you're going to see some threads coming through, but I am also conscious it's a bit like having your homework marked in front of everybody. So maybe, I don't know, mark out of 10 at the end would be appreciated. So like most publishers, we started looking at this at the end of 2022, when it became apparent that kind of the big tech rollout was going to have huge consequences for our business. So we started with what I like to kind of fondly refer to as the panic map. So this is us noting down all of the places in our business we thought generative AI is going to have a consequence for and impact what we do. And as you can see, the shortcut is it's everywhere. But the reason that none of the kind of heads of any of those brands are here talking to you, or indeed our CTO, very much speaks to kind of the approach and the context we already found ourselves in as publishers way before anyone had heard about OpenAI. So Katja and I work in content strategy and in business transformation. So we spend our time thinking about how we can protect and future-proof our business models, but also how we increase digital literacy. So how our journalists are using data, how they're capturing video assets, how they are making sure to keep up with all of the ever-changing social platform requirements. Or, as I know we are fondly and lovingly referred to in the business, the what fresh hell is this now department. And so our day-to-days really can be summed up by this slide. We work starting with kind of very intelligent, but often sceptical, often acerbic journalists who are eye-rolling about change. And we work with them to empower them to engage with the change. And I think this point is vital for AI. Lean in so that they can have agency in informing and driving what that change looks like. So because this is our role and this is what we do day to day, our company turned to us to advise on what and how do we think about generative AI as a business? How do we get the company to care? Now, compared to a lot of things that I work on, getting attention and getting people to kind of sit up and listen isn't a problem. I have to roll out often campaigns around content tagging, which is far less easy to get people to enthuse about. And there's been so much kind of media clamour and kind of generating opinion. But probably the biggest thing, the tool in our arsenal that we've got for people to kind of engage with what we are saying is the potential for generative AI to solve one of the universal problems we are always tackling. So I spend my days telling journalists repeatedly to do conflicting things. So I want them to be data-led, but I want them to be authentic. I want them to be aware of costs, but I want them to be inspiring. I want them to create content that is modular, but I need it to be personally relevant to people. And so, understandably, what I get lambasted back with all the time is we do not have the time to do all of this. So, you talked about, Angie, about kind of knowing your problem. This very much became part of our ethos and our ambition as a company. How can we look at using generative AI to create more time, not as a shortcutting exercise in its own right, but as a way to kind of invest in creativity? So before Katja talks to you through this kind of specific use cases of how we're doing that, I just wanted to lean into this creative tension a bit more, because it really is at the crux of what we're trying to do. And I think it's really important to be talking about it now. So I've been a journalist, believe it or not, for 20 years. And I started on the magazines at the Financial Times. And I've seen a lot of change in that time. So when I started, being a journalist felt a little bit like, Hunter S. Thompson. It's type of whimsy. So it was very ego-driven, yes, and that kind of couldn't be problematic. But it also was very creative. It was around human connections, little black books. It was about just instinctive storytelling. There was a lot of whimsy. There was a lot of joy. Then I've worked through times where content production is a lot more keyword driven, ROI obsessed, around kind of strategic workflows of how can we create quality content but at scale and at pace. And now I see us kind of like here, the kind of bamboozled content creators, where everybody is trying to kind of serve all business models with all content formats on all content platforms, all at the same time, and steam's coming out of their ears. And they're doing this in a competitive space where kind of they're going up against YouTube influencers who've got bags of authenticity, bags of creativity, and also no corporate overheads to kind of fulfill beyond a webcam in their bedroom. So when defining what is kind of the role of generative AI in our business, it was really about this. How can we use it to create more time, to reinvest, and what I like to say, bring some whimsy and joy back into the editorial process? So hopefully we'll get some marks for this. We started by building kind of our strategy around 4 buckets of activity. So first of all, audiences and ecosystem. We've heard a lot about that today. What are our audiences doing? What will their world look like? And how will they behave as a result? What are the big platforms doing? And how will that impact the way and our ability to speak to our audiences? Then learning and transformation. So what are the skills and ways of working that are needed to be live in our business in order to mitigate some of these risks, but also leverage the opportunity? Workflow productivity. How can we use generative AI to do a lot of the stuff we're already doing, but better and faster to reinvest that time? And then finally, innovation. What will it help us do with our audiences that we couldn't before, or indeed what new audiences could it unlock? So that's the 4 pillars of the strategy. But if you strip that back even further, it comes to every aspect of change management and how we think about it. Defining the problem. What are we actually talking about? What is generative AI? How does it work? Why should we care? And why should the individuals who work in our companies care? And how can we empower them to get involved directly as soon as possible? So how do we embed them with the knowledge to feel the relevancy of this, to engage and have agency in where this is all going? So I'll pass you to Katja. I'll talk to you a bit more specifics about how that played out.
Thank you, Hannah. So I think in the next few minutes, I will add some practical examples to our strategy, but also to the discussions from this morning. You will see that each example that I'll speak to ties back to one of the buckets of the AI strategy that Hannah mentioned. So what were the highlights of our AI journey and how did we get here? We started quite early when we saw that this has a huge impact. So we really started working heavily on this in January of 2023. The first thing we did was to create guardrails. So I think maybe we get a little tick for that. We launched a very prescriptive testing program for editors because we found that people don't know what they don't know. And if you just ask them, how can this be useful? You know, social teams say the newsletter and newsletter teams say the print magazine. We build a community of practice now with AI champions across departments because we did also realize that you need departmental leads that really know what a job looks like to see what AI impact is. We launched an AI toolkit recently, which gives the company all the tools they need in the AI journey. For example, people can apply for access to different tools that we will then pay for centrally if they, share the use case they have in mind with us. And there are 2 really big initiatives that were 2 company-wide events dedicated to generative AI that I will speak a bit more about. In July last year, we held an Immersion Day, which was a company-wide day with AI keynotes and workshops. And that was followed in September by a so-called Experimentation Day, which was basically a company-wide hackathon where we worked on 27 AI projects altogether. And are we successful with our approach? Well, I think this is still early days and the jury is still out, but we recently ran a survey and we found that 70% of our company feels that they are somewhat confident or very confident already with the use of AI tools, which I think is quite positive. So, on to the AI Immersion Day. I think this was really important because it was like the one day where we quickly realized that this is relevant for everybody, as Hannah said at the beginning. So we wanted to make sure we give the entire company a very well-rounded, holistic image of what this is. We started by our CEO, Sean Cornwell, giving an introduction of why are we here today, to make sure that this is a topic that is backed by the CEO and backed by the leadership. We had 2 talks to level set the knowledge. One was a technical foundation, which we called Why AI Isn't Google, where we actually explained to the entire company how LLMs work, and one level set, which we called What is Generative AI and What Does It Mean for Media Now and the Future. We had a brilliant talk by the ethicist Dr. Carrie McInerney, because we think that as a media company, it's super important to look at that as well, because with our role as journalists and content creators. And then we also had to talk about the practical application to get everybody excited and actually introduce some tools. We also had 8 workshops on the day, and I brought them the detailed look at them because they're still super relevant today. So by now we have a proper learning program, and they still tie back to them. I think the most important thing to say here is this is not just content. You can see that it has all kinds of areas. So we had some general workshops around harnessing AI for time-saving presentations, one of the most requested use cases there's out there. I think we all spend way too much time in PowerPoint. We had some marketing and sales workshops, for example, where we trained people up in Midjourney. We had a lot of product and tech workshops, actually. So how can you speed up product development with AI? How can you connect the APIs and embedding vector databases and similarity metrics, something a bit too technical for me. And then we did have some content workshops around how to write effective prompts, for example. And at the end of this immersion day, we asked the entire company to submit ideas for AI projects, not knowing if anybody would step forward. And it was really cool to see that over 71 people submitted ideas for AI projects, which were either in product innovation or the workflow bucket. So in September, we got the company together for 2 days, which was a huge investment. And we actually worked on these projects in interdepartmental teams. And at the end, every project had to pitch for 1 minute, and we also gave, them prizes for out of the box or biggest company value creator or something like that. 222 people worked on these projects, and some examples were that we created children's audio books with AI proofreading, which is a really cool workflow use case. Radio Times built a crossword generator in the 2 days, and we played around with the commerce chatbot. You can see that they all relate back to the 9 buckets, and 9 of these 27 projects are actually now still going on and became part of the BAU, so this investment was super worthwhile. And lastly, I do want to quickly show what are our guardrails. And you probably all have similar ones now. I don't think we need to chat through them entirely, but I think it's funny that you said that earlier, Olivia, because we found exactly the same thing. So the rules were super important to help people actually experiment and explore, because before that, people feel really insecure about this, and this is very new. So by giving them some guardrails and frameworks to experiment within, we found that the creativity really exploded. And we are also quite strict. So for example, we would never publish anything generated from AI direct for audience consumption. That's just a rule we have. So now I brought a few examples that represent some areas from over 40 initiatives and use cases that we have going on at Immediate. I'm super happy to name a bit more in the discussion later. This is a print example, or how we used a podcast to reformat it into print. But I think it represents this whole use case bucket of reformatting, repurposing, which is one of our favorites. So here we use 2 tools. We use Trint and ChatGPT to use a podcast of our existing history podcast and reformat it into a print article. Without AI, this would have taken 2 days. With AI, it took 2 hours. So we had an over 80% time saving, and it really does tick all the boxes because we are using our own content and IP, so this still gives us a USP and is protected. And it is very in line with our strategy to be multimodal because, as Hannah said, we want to do everything at the same time. And as Angie said earlier as well, like we need to make sure that we're not just using AI for the sake of it, but we're really making sure that it ties in with the strategic objectives. And this can actually go in multiple directions. So we're doing voice to video, text to shorter text, etc. In this example, we used a combination of AI tools to create an interactive comic just from text that a reader sent through. So I think this is a really great creative use case from our youth and children's team. And this is an example of something that we wouldn't have done before. So I think this is not just about getting faster at existing processes, but before that, it would have just been too time consuming to do something like that. The next use case is about how we want to use AI to create content for neurodiverse audiences. And this project even won an award at a so-called AI Demo Day. So 20% of the population is neurodiverse. And we do want to help them by taking our published content and using AI to transform it into the format that is best suited for each user. And we want to start that by doing that with kids, the most vulnerable group. And this is a work in progress, but you could even use AI to make all the articles that you have online available to listen to. The tech is very ready, and that would already have a massive impact for accessibility. And this also represents the autonomy of consumption, which we will be able to give everybody. And I think that's also something that people will expect at some point. They already want the choice to have a video or the text, and this really the technology enables us to do that. I'm almost done with my examples. Cool. This is actually a project that also came out of the experimentation days, and it's about games and puzzles. We all know that games and puzzles are good for engagements and consumers like them. They are a registration and a subscription driver, and they really integrate with the strategy. So this game here was built during the experimentation day, and we are also working on market versions right now. And lastly, disclaimer, this is not live yet, but we are also working with Miso AI, which maybe other people here have as well, to think about how we can integrate AI into our UX. And you can see here that this is training on our own content, and it is surfing summaries. And this also shows that we don't need to build everything ourselves. There's tools out there that we can work with. There's people out there that we can lean on. And let's see how consumers react to that. That was it. Back over to Hannah.
Thanks, Katja. So that's just a flavour of some of the use cases we are experimenting with and how we came about, how they kind of came to them. And we are still very much in the experimentation phase. But as we kind of digest all that we've learned so far, we're settling on kind of 3 key principles that are shaping our approach kind of as we move forward. And the first one, it's a theme throughout the day, but involve everyone, and kind of like 2 main reasons for that, really. A lot of the use cases that we have kind of seen deliver the most impact, they really need kind of people who really understand the nuance and the detail, people right at the coalface of that use case to inform them, or else you kind of lose some of the inherent value of why you were doing things like that in the first place. And then secondly, obviously, these large language models, they just reflect the societal assumptions that we kind of put into them. So if we are going to have kind of a use of AI that really reflects the kind of diversity of our teams, but also of our audiences, we really need a diversity of lived experience to inform them and how we're using them. And I know I said kind of before that we should pressurise the government to kind of, and I agree that we should, to make sure that there is kind of universal access and information to. But I do think there's an agency on the individual. Like if you are sceptical, like now's not the time to lean back and turn away. Now's the time to kind of get informed and engage. So you've got some agency in shaping it. The second one is to stay iterative. Like, the tools, kind of what you can use them for, what you should use them for, are changing all of the time, as is kind of the audience's reaction to them. So an AI strategy and how we use AI today is not going to be what we're going to be doing next year. But you need to kind of take the whole hive on the journey with you if you're going to have a really kind of empowered hive mind to help you navigate the risks and the opportunity as they unfold ongoing. And then lastly, then it's the big one for me, kind of invest in creativity. So having kind of like embedding generative AI into your workflows and your practices is not going to give you a competitive advantage. It's going to help you maintain your position on an ever-growing, ever-leveling playing field. But the unique, kind of expert, charismatic, creative folks who work for you are going to give you a creative advantage, a competitive advantage. So invest in those guys. And ask yourselves, in a world that is kind of dominated by big tech or AI automated content, what will be the power of brands, and kind of champion the kind of those in the way you structure, the way you support, the way you equip, and the way you measure your teams. Kind of set them up better to spend their time being creative. That's it from us.